Heartstring Media presents
Hearts of the Cultivators. Written by Poppy Wei Lian.
narrated by Hudson Calder and Ren Rosewood, featuring Aaron Vallon and Yuri Blanchet with the Lingshan Ensemble.
Chapter 2. With the wild boar properly seasoned and set aside to marinate, I reluctantly returned to the sect kitchen. The communal dinner wouldn't prepare itself, and 20 hungry cultivators would soon emerge from their preparations, their anxiety likely having sharpened their appetites. The kitchen stood empty upon my return, the late afternoon sunlight streaming through its single window to illuminate dancing dust motes. I rolled up my sleeves, making sure to leave a strategic smudge of dirt on one forearm, and set to work. First, I arranged 6 woks of varying sizes along the hearth, then stoked the fire until it roared like a small dragon beneath the cooking surface. The kitchen's familiar sounds enveloped me, the rhythmic chopping of my knife against the worn cutting board, the sizzle of oil hitting hot metal, the bubbling of broths and sauces. I moved between tasks, my hands seeming to know what to do before my mind directed them. "Let's see what we can do to calm everyone's nerves," I murmured to Old Pan as I tossed in finely minced garlic. The pungent aroma filled the kitchen immediately, its sharp scent clearing my head. From the storage baskets came the day's gathered vegetables, spring onions sliced paper thin, wild carrots cut into perfect medallions, forest mushrooms torn rather than cut to preserve their texture. To these, I added dried bamboo shoots, rehydrated in savory broth, tender green beans from our garden, and roots that Grandpa had taught me would strengthen the body's resistance to fear. The kitchen gradually filled with a symphony of aromas as 5 vegetable dishes took shape under my care. But tonight called for something more substantial. With a glance toward the door to ensure my privacy, I reached into my sleeve and withdrew a small package wrapped in bamboo leaves, a portion of the wild boar I'd caught, separate from what I'd reserved for my own dinner. "You'll have to forgive me for holding back the best cuts," I whispered to the meat as I unwrapped it. "But I think everyone could use your strength tonight." I worked quickly, slicing the meat into thin strips before marinating it with fermented bean paste, a splash of rice wine, and mountain honey. The 6th wok welcomed the pork with a satisfying sizzle, sending up clouds of fragrant steam that would soon reach every corner of the compound. The kitchen door creaked open just as I was arranging the final dish. Liu Dawei poked his head in, his nose twitching appreciatively. "Is that meat I smell?" he asked, eyes widening as he spotted the pork dish. "Just a simple preparation," I replied with a shrug, deliberately dropping a bean sprout on the floor as I turned. "Nothing special." Zhang Mingyu and 3 other second-year disciples filed in behind him, their scheduled duty of setting the dining hall drawing them like moths to the kitchen's flame, or more accurately, to its aromas. "Bai Chen, you've outdone yourself," Zhang Mingyu said, peering over my shoulder at the array of dishes. "I thought we were in for another night of roots and leaves." Liu Dawei approached the pork dish with reverence, inhaling deeply. "Where did you get meat? The hunting party returned empty-handed yesterday." I offered a vague smile. "The mountain provides if you know where to look." "Well, the mountain has excellent taste," another disciple, Chen Liwei, remarked. "This might make everyone forget about tomorrow's visitors for at least a few moments." They gathered the dishes with unusual care, arranging them on carrying trays. As they worked, their conversation inevitably returned to the impending arrival. "I heard 4th Master Feng of Lingshan once trapped a demon in a formation so complex that even the demon's immortal master couldn't break it," Chen Liwei whispered, his eyes darting nervously toward the door. "That's nothing," Zhang Mingyu countered. 5th Master Rong supposedly communes with spirit beasts. They say even phoenixes bow to him. Liu Dawei shook his head. "You're both wrong about who's most terrifying. It's 6th Master Song. He knows every text ever written. They say he can recite your death from ancient prophecies just by looking at your palm." I listened with half an ear as I finished the final dish, a simple soup with medicinal properties that would help calm nerves and promote restful sleep. The dining hall filled quickly as word spread about the pork dish. Even Elder Wang emerged from his study, his ancient face lighting up at the sight of the laden tables. The long wooden tables that normally hosted casual, boisterous meals now held disciples sitting ramrod straight, their faces tense despite the enticing aromas. The head table, positioned on a slightly raised platform at the front of the hall, seated the sect's small leadership. Elder Liu sat at the center, his weathered face drawn with concern, flanked by Elder Wang, who rarely emerged from his meditation cave or small study, and Elder Guo, whose gnarled hands trembled slightly as he leaned on his walking stick. Teacher Fang and Senior Brother Chen occupied the remaining seats, their worried expressions easing somewhat as the food was placed before them. The simple comfort of a hot meal provided momentary respite from their concerns, though Elder Guo, who had once ruled this kitchen before illness confined him to advisory duties, cast an approving nod toward my dishes. I took my usual place at the end of the junior disciples' table, deliberately slouching and dropping a bit of rice on my already stained robe. Around me, the initial silence of the meal gradually gave way to cautious conversation as the food worked its subtle magic. The pork dish, in particular, drew appreciative murmurs and even a few smiles. "This is exactly what we needed," Senior Brother Wei announced from the third year's table, raising his bowl slightly in my direction. "Good work, Bai Chen." I ducked my head in acknowledgement, secretly pleased. The special root I'd added to the pork's marinade was already working, a mild relaxant that wouldn't dull the senses but would ease the tightness in their chests. By morning, they would face the Lingshan envoys with clearer heads, if not entirely calm hearts. As the meal concluded, disciples lingered longer than usual, reluctant to return to their quarters and face their anxious thoughts alone. I began gathering empty dishes, stacking them carefully for the return journey to the kitchen. Liu Dawei and Zhang Mingyu joined me, along with 2 female disciples who normally avoided kitchen duty. Tonight, it seemed, everyone sought the comfort of mundane tasks and company. "Do you think they'll really come tomorrow?" asked one of the girls, Lin Xiaoyu, as she scrubbed a stubborn bit of sauce from a bowl. Her hands trembled slightly despite her efforts to appear calm. "Of course they will," Liu Dawei replied, his usual bravado subdued. "The question is what they'll want from us." Zhang Mingyu dunked another stack of bowls into the washing tub. "I heard the 6 masters of Lingshan personally visit every sect to determine their worth." "6?" I asked, genuinely curious despite myself. "How many exactly are there?" The others exchanged glances as if shocked by my ignorance. "There are 6. The 3 elder masters lead Lingshan's inner circle," Lin Xiaoyu explained patiently. "First Master Jiang Yuelu, the sword master, Second Master Zhao Minghua, the medicine expert, and Third Master Xu Zhelin, who handles external affairs. But there are 3 others nearly as powerful," added the other female disciple, Mei Fang. "Fourth Master Feng Liwei, the formation master, Fifth Master Rong Tianyu, who commands spirit beasts, and Sixth Master Song Jingyi, keeper of ancient knowledge." Liu Dawei shuddered dramatically. "They say the 6 masters can communicate without speaking, that they share one mind divided among 6 bodies. I heard they were all orphan brothers, raised by the Lingshan sect grandmaster specifically to overthrow Tianyi sect," Zhang Mingyu added in a hushed tone. "That's ridiculous," Mei Fang scoffed, though her voice lacked conviction. "They're not actually brothers, just senior disciples who trained together." "Brothers in cultivation, if not in blood," Lin Xiaoyu said solemnly. "And now they hold our fate in their hands." I scrubbed at a particularly stubborn pot, wondering what these legendary masters ate. Did they enjoy simple pleasures like a well-prepared meal, or did they subsist on pure spiritual energy and the fear of their enemies? "What do you think they'll do with us, Bai Chen?" Zhang Mingyu asked suddenly, pulling me from my thoughts. I blinked, surprised at being consulted. Me? I imagine they'll want tribute of some kind. Resources, perhaps. Resources? Liu Dawei laughed without humor. What resources does Qinggu sect have that would interest Lingshan? We're barely surviving as it is. I thought of the mountain's bounty, the herbs and plants that grew nowhere else, the spiritual energy that flowed through certain hidden valleys, things that Grandpa had taught me to find and nurture, things that larger sects would certainly value. But I kept these thoughts to myself. Perhaps they'll simply want our loyalty, I suggested instead. A promise not to oppose them. The others seemed to find this reasonable, and the conversation gradually shifted to speculation about what tomorrow's visitors might look like. Would they arrive on swordlight? Would spirit beasts accompany them? Would they wear the rumored celestial armor of Lingshan's elite? By the time we finished cleaning, the kitchen gleamed in the lantern light, and some of the tension had eased from my companions' shoulders. They bid me good night with unusual warmth, perhaps grateful for the distraction the meal and cleanup had provided. I watched them go, their lanterns bobbing like fireflies as they made their way to the dormitories. Only when the last light disappeared did I turn toward my own shed, anticipation quickening my steps. Night had fully descended over Qinggu sect by the time I reached my humble dwelling, bringing with it a welcome silence after the day's commotion. The communal dinner had achieved its purpose, providing comfort and distraction, but I had served only what the disciples would actually eat. The meal had been good, but deliberately conventional, lacking the wild mountain herbs and unusual ingredients they'd repeatedly rejected. "You're wasting good food on ungrateful stomachs," Elder Guo had told me after my third attempt to introduce the sect to proper mountain cuisine. "Save your special ingredients for those who appreciate them." Now, in the blessed privacy of my shed, I could finally indulge in proper cooking. The wild boar simmered in my private clay pot, its rich aroma mingling with the mountain herbs I'd carefully selected. The ugly purple herb from the cliff face had been crushed and added at precisely the right moment, its bitter essence transforming into something sublime as it melded with the meat. A handful of golden-veined mushrooms, ones the other disciples had wrinkled their noses at when offered, floated alongside tender root vegetables. Their loss was my gain. The single lantern cast dancing shadows across the shed's weathered walls, its warm glow reflecting off the polished surface of my cooking implements. Unlike the haphazard arrangement I maintained in the sect kitchen, here my tools hung in perfect order, each one cleaned to gleaming perfection and placed exactly where it belonged. With the stew bubbling, I sprawled across my straw mat, one leg extended and the other bent at the knee. A single stalk of sweet grass dangled from my lips, bobbing gently as I contemplated the familiar pages of Grandpa's recipe book. The book itself was unassuming, bound in faded leather with no title or ornamentation, its pages yellowed with age and spotted with the occasional grease mark or herb stain. To anyone else, the worn volume would appear to be nothing more than a collection of odd cooking instructions and peculiar drawings. The faded ink illustrations showed plants with exaggerated features, cooking vessels arranged in strange formations, and curious diagrams of food circulation. But I knew better. "Absorb the essence through the cinnabar field while maintaining breath like autumn water," I murmured around the grass stalk, reciting the instructions beneath a drawing of what appeared to be a man eating soup. "Allow the vapors to circulate through the 12 meridians before settling in the core." The stew bubbled once, twice, then settled into a perfect simmer. The timing was crucial. Grandpa's notes were specific about the alignment of flavors with energy channels. Too early, and the essence would disperse. Too late, and the spiritual properties would congeal. I flipped to a well-worn page marked with a dried flower, a rare mountain orchid that bloomed once every 60 years. The illustration showed what appeared to be a farmer planting seeds, but the positioning of his hands and the flow lines around his body revealed the true purpose. a cultivation technique disguised as agricultural advice. When planting the golden seed, ensure the soil of the lower field is properly prepared, I read, mentally translating the farming metaphors into cultivation instructions. Water flows downward naturally, but the wise farmer guides it in circles to nourish the entire garden. I'd practiced these farming techniques daily since Grandpa first taught them to me. They felt as natural as breathing now, the energy flowing through my meridians in perfect harmony with each breath. While other disciples struggled with rigid postures and complicated mantras, I simply followed Grandpa's farming wisdom. The stew released a perfect plume of steam, signaling its readiness. I rolled to my feet with fluid grace, a movement that would have shocked anyone who knew me as the clumsy herb gatherer, and retrieved my favorite bowl, a simple wooden vessel polished smooth by years of use. Its surface bore tiny characters carved around the rim, ancient symbols that Grandpa claimed predated modern cultivation methods. The first spoonful was a revelation, as always. The flavors danced across my tongue, the rich umami of the wild boar, the earthy depth of the mushrooms, the complex bitterness of the ugly herb that transformed into unexpected sweetness as it hit the back of my palate. But more importantly, I could feel the essence of the ingredients flowing into my body, strengthening my core and nourishing my meridians. This wasn't merely food, it was cultivation in its purest form. As I ate, I maintained the breathing pattern illustrated in Grandpa's book, like a gentle breeze across summer rice fields, allowing the energy to circulate properly. With each bite, I could feel my cultivation base strengthening, the energy settling into my core like morning dew collecting on leaves. "You were right as always, Grandpa," I murmured to the empty room. "The uglier the herb, the more beautiful its essence." Outside, an owl hooted softly, its call echoing across the quiet compound. The sect members had retreated to their quarters, no doubt tossing and turning with anxiety about tomorrow's visitors. But here, in my private sanctuary, there was only the rhythm of cultivation and the satisfaction of a perfectly prepared meal. I returned to my princely sprawl on the mat, bowl cradled against my chest as I continued to savor both the flavor and the energy. Tomorrow, the fearsome Lingshan sect would arrive with all their power and glory, but tonight, in my humble shed, I cultivated in the most pleasant way possible, one delicious spoonful at a time. Let them come with their sword auras and mountain-shattering techniques. I had my stew, my recipes, and my simple farming methods. What more could an immortal farmer possibly need? Long after the sect had fallen into uneasy slumber, I slipped from my shed like a shadow. The night air carried a refreshing chill, perfect for what I had planned. With practiced stealth, I navigated between buildings, my footsteps soundless against the packed earth. The eastern wall, the one most claimed by moss and vines, offered the perfect escape route. A particularly sturdy vine had served as my private exit for months now, allowing me to come and go without disturbing the night watchman who dozed at the main gate. Once beyond the wall, I moved with greater freedom, no longer needing to maintain my deliberately clumsy gait. The bamboo forest welcomed me with its familiar whispers, stalks swaying gently in the night breeze. Unlike most disciples who found the dense growth disorienting, I read the forest like an old friend's face, each bend and clearing as familiar as my own hands. "Hello, old friends," I murmured to the bamboo as I passed, my fingers brushing their smooth surfaces. Still growing strong, I see. The path I followed existed only in my mind, a twisting route that changed with the seasons and the forest's growth. Tonight, it led me deeper than usual, past the places where other disciples might venture on dares or for training. After nearly an hour of walking, the bamboo thinned suddenly, revealing my destination, a hidden spring nestled in a natural hollow. Steam rose from its surface in delicate wisps, evidence of the hot mineral waters that bubbled up from deep within the mountain. The pool itself was roughly circular, perhaps 20 paces across, its edges lined with smooth stones that gleamed silver in the moonlight. Perfect, I sighed, already untying my belt. My clothes, deliberately dirtied for public appearance, fell away easily, and I folded them with unexpected neatness on a flat rock near the water's edge. The wooden bead bracelet remained on my wrist. It never left my person, not even for bathing. The first touch of the hot spring against my toes sent a pleasant shiver up my spine. I eased in slowly, savoring the heat as it enveloped my body inch by inch. When I finally submerged to my shoulders, a contented sigh escaped me, the sound of pure, uncomplicated pleasure. "This is what cultivation should be," I murmured to the night air, tilting my head back to gaze at the stars visible through the bamboo canopy. Warm, comfortable, and requiring minimal effort. The spring's mineral-rich waters worked their magic, dissolving tension I hadn't realized I was carrying. My thoughts drifted lazily, unconcerned with tomorrow's visitors or the sect's uncertain fate. Such matters seemed distant and unimportant compared to the perfect temperature of the water and the gentle caress of steam against my face. After soaking for several minutes, I set about my true purpose. From a small pouch I'd brought along, I extracted a chunk of herb-infused soap, another of Grandpa's recipes, this one designed to cleanse both body and meridians. I worked it into a rich lather between my palms before applying it to my skin and hair with methodical care. As I rinsed the soap away, I caught my reflection in the now still surface of the spring. The moonlight provided perfect illumination, revealing a face I rarely allowed others to see clearly. Without the strategic smudges and deliberately unkempt appearance, my features held a delicate harmony that even I found somewhat surprising. No wonder Grandpa was so insistent, I mused, studying the reflection with detached curiosity. My eyes, an unusual hazel gray that Grandpa claimed came from my mother's side, stood out against my pale skin. My hair, now clean and floating on the water's surface around me like black silk, had none of the coarseness I pretended in public. My features were neither particularly masculine nor feminine, but balanced in a way that Grandpa had called troublesome. "Keep your face dirty and your head down," he'd instructed countless times after the incident with the traveling merchants who'd tried to buy me from him when I was 8. Beauty attracts unwanted attention, and unwanted attention attracts trouble. I'd followed his advice faithfully, though I never quite understood the fuss. What practical advantage did pleasing features offer? They couldn't help find herbs or improve cooking. If anything, based on Grandpa's warnings, they seemed more hindrance than help. A sudden rustling from the bamboo broke my reverie. I froze, instantly alert. No animal moved that deliberately, which meant only one thing: a person approached. In a heartbeat, I slid deeper into the water until only my eyes and nose remained above the surface. My hand moved instinctively toward my clothes and the small knife hidden within them, but they were frustratingly out of reach. The bamboo parted, and a figure stepped into the clearing. Even in the moonlight, I could tell this was no disciple from Chingu sect. The stranger stood tall, taller than anyone in our small sect, with broad shoulders and a confident stance that spoke of significant cultivation. He wore simple traveling clothes rather than sect robes, but the quality of the fabric betrayed wealth beyond a common wanderer. His hair hung loose around his shoulders instead of being bound in the traditional cultivator's topknot, giving him a wild, untamed appearance. Most striking, however, was his face, or rather what I could see of it. The upper half was obscured by a simple half-mask of dark material, revealing only a strong jaw and lips that seemed permanently set in a serious expression. We stared at each other in momentary shock before the stranger spoke, his voice deep and unexpectedly direct.
"I didn't realize this spring was occupied."
Despite his words, he made no move to leave. Instead, he surveyed the clearing with the casual assessment of someone used to claiming whatever space he entered. I rose slightly from the water, keeping my shoulders submerged. Well, now you know. There must be other springs nearby.
None with water this clear.
He replied, his gaze returning to me with unsettling intensity.
I've been traveling for days.
That sounds like a personal problem, I retorted, surprised by my own boldness. Something about this masked stranger irritated me, perhaps the way he stood there as if waiting for me to accommodate him. To my astonishment, his serious mouth twitched slightly at one corner.
Indeed it is. A problem that could be solved by sharing this generously sized spring.
I blinked, momentarily speechless. Was he suggesting?
The spring is large enough for two.
He continued, already untying the outer layer of his traveling clothes.
I'll stay on the opposite side, little bamboo spirit.
Little, what did you call me? I sputtered, caught between indignation and confusion at the sudden nickname.
Bamboo spirit,
he replied, gesturing to our surroundings.
Found in a secret bamboo grove, with skin like jade and eyes that catch the moonlight. What else would I call you?
My name, if I chose to give it, I retorted. Which I don't, and you can't just…
I can, and I will,
he interrupted, shrugging off his outer robe to reveal an inner layer of finer material.
Unless you're planning to physically remove me from this clearing.
He paused, his hands at the tie of his inner robe, one eyebrow visibly raised above his mask in challenge. I assessed him quickly, the breadth of his shoulders, the evident strength in his arms, the casual confidence that spoke of significant combat training. Even if I weren't naked in a hot spring, this wasn't a fight I could win. Fine, I conceded with poor grace. The opposite side, and turn around while you disrobe. A ghost of a smile touched his lips.
As you wish, bamboo spirit.
He turned his back, continuing to undress with efficient movements. Despite my annoyance, I couldn't help noticing the defined muscles of his back as he removed his inner robe. Whoever this stranger was, he trained rigorously. I averted my eyes as he stepped into the spring, focusing instead on a particularly interesting bamboo stalk until the sound of water settling indicated he had submerged himself.
See? Plenty of room,
he said, now seated on the opposite side, as promised, the water reaching his chest. I glared at him across the steaming surface. Do you make a habit of intruding on private baths?
Do you make a habit of claiming public hot springs as private?
He countered smoothly. It's not public if no one knows it exists, I argued.
I knew it existed,
he pointed out reasonably. Only because you were trespassing through these mountains, I retorted. He leaned back against the smooth stones, looking infuriatingly comfortable.
All mountains belong to heaven and earth, not to men.
I couldn't help but roll my eyes. Save the philosophical platitudes for someone impressed by them. To my surprise, he laughed, a rich, genuine sound that seemed at odds with his serious demeanor.
You're refreshingly direct. Most people wouldn't speak so boldly to a stranger.
Most people aren't interrupted during their bath by masked intruders, I pointed out.
Fair enough.
He studied me openly now, his eyes difficult to read behind the mask.
You're not from the nearby sect, are you?
The question caught me off guard. What makes you say that? He gestured vaguely.
Your speech patterns, your mannerisms. You don't carry yourself like someone trained in their style.
I tensed slightly. Had I been too natural in my movements, too graceful? I deliberately slouched lower in the water. I'm just a disciple gathering herbs, I said, intentionally making my voice rougher. Nothing special. The sound was non-committal, but skeptical. An uncomfortable silence fell between us, broken only by the occasional bubble rising from the spring's depths. I became acutely aware of how exposed I was, not just physically, but in other ways. Away from the sect, without my carefully constructed facade of clumsiness and dirt, I felt strangely vulnerable. Why the mask? I asked suddenly, more to break the silence than out of genuine curiosity. He touched it reflexively, as if confirming it was still in place.
Why the pretense of being ordinary?
I stiffened. I don't know what you mean.
I think you do.
His voice remained casual, but his eyes never left mine.
Your speech shifts between educated and common. Your movements are too precise for just a disciple gathering herbs. You're hiding something.
Says the man in a mask. I deflected. Another smile touched his lips.
Touché.
The steam rose between us, carrying the herbal scent of my soap. I noticed his nostrils flare slightly as he caught the fragrance.
That's an unusual soap.
He remarked.
Mountain sage, spirit mint, and something I don't recognize.
I raised an eyebrow, impressed despite myself. You have a good nose.
I have good everything.
He replied without a hint of modesty. A startled laugh escaped me before I could stop it. I felt my cheeks grow warm as his eyes seemed to brighten at the sound. And humble too, I added, fighting to suppress a smile.
Humility is overrated.
He said with a dismissive wave.
Accuracy in self-assessment is more valuable.
Is that why you're traveling alone through dangerous mountains at night? I asked. Accurate self-assessment of your invincibility? Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, that I'd turned the conversation back to him.
I prefer solitude for thinking. My companions are sometimes distracting.
Companions, I repeated. You mean servants? Guards?
Brothers,
He corrected.
of a sort.
The way he said it reminded me of the rumors about the Lingshan brothers. But that was absurd. What would one of those fearsome cultivators be doing bathing in a hidden spring the night before their official arrival? And what brings you to these particular mountains? I asked, curiosity getting the better of me. He studied me for a moment before answering.
Personal matters. I find these mountains restorative.
Personal matters, I repeated skeptically. In the middle of nowhere?
The middle of nowhere is precisely where personal matters are best handled,
He replied with a slight smile.
away from prying eyes and expectations.
I suppose that explains the mask, I ventured. Is it for medical reasons or vanity? He blinked, clearly surprised by the bluntness.
Neither. It's a habit.
A habit of hiding your face?
A habit of maintaining privacy.
He corrected.
Not everyone needs to see everything.
Says the man who invited himself into my bath, I pointed out. That earned another laugh, deeper this time.
You're not what I expected to find in these mountains.
And what did you expect?
Simple disciples, humble cultivators.
His eyes traveled over what he could see of me above the water. My face, my shoulders, the curve of my neck.
Not you.
The way he said it sent an unexpected shiver down my spine despite the hot water. There was something in his gaze that felt like more than casual observation, a focus and intensity that seemed to see through surface appearances. I am a simple disciple, I insisted, fighting the urge to sink deeper into the water under his scrutiny.
No,
He said with quiet certainty.
you're not.
Before I could formulate a response, he moved suddenly, water rippling around him as he shifted to a more upright position.
It's getting late. I should return before I'm missed.
Relief and inexplicable disappointment mingled as I watched him rise partially from the water, his broad shoulders and chest emerging like a sculpture taking form. I quickly averted my eyes, focusing intently on a nearby rock as he exited the spring.
You can look now.
He said after a moment, amusement evident in his voice. I turned to find him fully dressed in his traveling clothes, water still dripping from his hair onto his shoulders. The mask remained firmly in place.
Thank you for sharing your spring.
He said with formal politeness that somehow sounded like teasing. I didn't have much choice, I reminded him.
Everyone has choices.
He gathered his few belongings.
You chose to stay rather than leave.
I hadn't considered that option, which was annoying in itself. The spring was mine first.
Possession is a temporary state,
he replied, sounding frustratingly philosophical again.
but I'll remember that this one is yours, bamboo spirit.
He turned to leave, then paused at the edge of the clearing.
Perhaps we'll meet again.
I doubt it, I said, though something in his confident posture suggested he knew otherwise. With a slight nod that might have been acknowledgement or farewell, he stepped back into the bamboo forest. Within moments, he had vanished as completely as if he'd never been there at all, leaving only ripples across the spring's surface as evidence of his presence. I remained in the water, oddly unsettled by the encounter. Something about the stranger nagged at me, not just his unexpected appearance or his mask, but the way he'd looked at me, as if he'd seen something worth noting. Ridiculous, I muttered to myself, finally rising from the spring. Just some wandering cultivator with boundary issues. As I dressed and prepared to return to the sect, I couldn't shake the feeling that the encounter had shifted something, like a pebble that starts an avalanche. But that was nonsense. Tomorrow, important visitors would arrive at our sect, and one strange encounter with a masked traveler would be the least of my concerns. Still, as I made my way back through the bamboo forest, I found myself touching my face, wondering exactly what he had seen that I had failed to hide.
You've been listening to Hearts of the Cultivators, a Heartstring media production. Written by Poppy Way Leon, narrated by Hudson Calder and Ren Rosewood, featuring Aaron Valen and Yuri Blanchet, with the Lingshan Ensemble.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe so you never miss an update in the Hearts of the Cultivators series. For more information on our books and upcoming releases, check the links in the description. Thanks for listening.